The silver lighter's flame flickered against the 18-shaped candle. Leo's hands trembled slightly as he set it down on the chocolate ganache cake. Outside the dining room window, rain streaked the glass like tears. 18 years of secrets were about to unravel. 13 hours earlier, that morning had begun like any other. Leo's hands, slightly trembling, placed the silver lighter to the single 18-shaped candle atop a chocolate ganache cake. The flame flicked to life, casting a dancing glow across the polished mahogany table. He had spent the entire morning preparing this moment, hoping it might bridge the distance that had grown between him and his daughter. Across the table, Maya sat with her chin in her hand, staring at the rain streaks on the window pane. She wore a black hoodie, her shoulders hunched as if trying to fold into herself. The reflected candlelight didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes remained fixed on the gray world outside. "I thought we could finally talk tonight," Leo said, his voice carrying a note of hope that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Really talk?" Maya turned her head slowly. She didn't look at the cake, but at her father's eyes. Her expression was flat, unmoved by the gesture. She picked up a silver fork from beside her plate and began tracing lines in the white linen tablecloth, creating faint indentations in the fabric. The metal scraped softly against the weave with each deliberate movement. "About what?" she asked, her voice cold and monotonic. "The weather? Or how busy you were 5 years ago?" Leo flinched as if struck. He reached for a glass of red wine, his fingers gripping the stem so hard his knuckles turned white. The wine was expensive, a vintage he'd been saving. He took a long swallow, his Adam's apple bobbing as he forced the liquid down his throat. The glass hit the table with a dull thud. Then the doorbell rang. It was sharp and loud, cutting through the silence like a blade. A ding-dong that echoed through the hallway. Leo froze mid-breath. Maya's eyebrows shot up, her fork stopping mid-scratch. They both stared at the hallway door, waiting. Leo stood up, his chair scraping back slightly. He walked toward the door with measured steps, though his pulse was already accelerating. He looked through the brass peephole. Outside, a woman in a soaked tan trench coat stood under the porch light. Her dark hair was plastered to her face. Even through the distorted fisheye lens, Leo could see her pale skin, her desperate expression. His stomach dropped. It was Elena. Elena, the woman he'd buried in the past 18 years ago. Leo stepped onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind him to keep Maya inside. The cold rain immediately drenched his navy shirt. Elena stepped forward, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks. She held a damp manila envelope, her fingers trembling as she clutched it. "You can't be here, not today," Leo said, his voice dropping to a hushed fury. "Not here, not now." "He needs to know, Leo." Elena's voice shook with crying. "I can't carry this anymore. I've been carrying it for 18 years. I can't do it anymore." "There's nothing to know." Leo reached for the envelope. "Whatever this is, it ends now." Elena pulled it back. Leo lunged, grabbing her wrists. They struggled against each other, their movements frantic and desperate. Elena's heels skid on the wet wood of the porch. Leo's grip tightened, and he shoved her back toward the stairs. Elena swung her heavy leather handbag with a sudden motion, catching Leo across the side of the head. The metal buckle left a red welt on his temple. Leo stumbled back, his hand flying to his face, seeing stars at the edge of his vision. He recovered quickly, snarling. He grabbed Elena by the shoulders and shook her. "Leave," he shouted. He pushed her down the 3 porch steps. She fell into the mud of the driveway, splashing into the wet earth. The envelope slipped from her hand. Leo descended the steps and snatched the envelope from the mud. It was soaked, the paper soft and pliable, but the words were still legible. "For Maya" was written in black marker on the front. The ink was bleeding into the yellow paper, creating dark veins. He heard the front door creak open behind him. Through the rain and the darkness, he heard Maya's voice calling out. Leo stuffed the envelope behind his back as he turned. Leo locked the office door with a silver key. His wet clothes dripped onto the hardwood floor. He sat at his desk, the mud-stained envelope in front of him, and took a moment to breathe. His hands were still shaking. He picked up a letter opener from the desk and tore the envelope open with a single decisive motion. A stack of photographs and a handwritten letter slid out onto the blotter. The first photograph made his breath catch. It showed a younger Leo, 18 years ago, standing next to a very pregnant Elena. They were smiling in front of a blue house. The date on the bottom right read, June 12, 2005. He set that aside and picked up a second document. His eyes moved across the lines, reading the names, the dates, the official seal at the bottom. It was a birth certificate. The name on the certificate was not Maya's. It read, Julian Thorne. The father's name was printed clearly, Leo Vance. The date of birth matched Maya's exactly. Not just the same day, but the same year, same month. Leo's breath came in short, shallow gasps. His fingers trembled as he held the paper. The room seemed to spin around him. Twin. Maya had a twin. A brother she never knew about. Elena had been raising him in secret for 18 years. This was why Maya felt that emptiness she could never name, that sense of something missing from her bones. She had felt the absence of a person she didn't even know existed. Leo moved quickly, driven by panic and desperation. He stood and went to the wall where a painting of a clipper ship hung. He swung it aside to reveal a wall safe. His fingers punched in the code. The heavy metal door swung open with a soft click. He placed the documents inside and closed the safe again, spinning the lock with his heart pounding in his chest. My God, he whispered to the empty room. There's two of them. A floorboard creaked outside the door. Leo's head snapped up, his eyes darting to the brass handle. The handle turned slowly, deliberately, then stopped. Someone was on the other side of the door. Someone was standing there in the hallway. Maya was on the other side. By 10 o'clock, Leo was at the kitchen island, drinking whiskey straight from a crystal glass. He had spent the hours since Maya's intrusion pacing through the house, checking and rechecking the safe, trying to formulate some kind of plan that didn't exist. His mind spiraled through possibilities, each worse than the last. The back door window shattered. Shards of glass scattered across the black tile floor like diamonds, each piece catching the light as it fell. The explosive sound echoed through the kitchen. Leo's hand jerked, and whiskey spilled across the counter. A young man stepped through the broken pane, careful to avoid the jagged edges. He wore a black windbreaker that hung loose on his lean frame. His face was tight with rage, his eyes narrowed to slits, his breathing heavy and deliberate. In his right hand, he held a tire iron. Even through the fury and the strangeness of the moment, Leo's mind registered one overwhelming fact. This young man looked like Maya. He looked like a male version of his daughter. The same high cheekbones, the same intense eyes, the same set to the jaw. You, the young man said. His voice was low and dangerous. You're Leo Vance. It wasn't a question. Leo threw the whiskey glass at him. It missed, smashing against the door frame behind the young man's head and raining down in fragments. The young man charged. He swung the tire iron in a wide arc. Leo ducked, the metal whistling inches above his head. Leo moved forward and tackled him around the waist, using the momentum to drive them both toward the kitchen island. They crashed into it with a sound like thunder. Bowls of fruit flew everywhere. Apples rolled across the floor. Pears tumbled through the air. The young man brought his knee up into Leo's stomach. Leo gasped, losing his grip, the wind driven from his lungs. The young man pinned Leo against the counter, the cold tire iron pressed against Leo's throat. Leo's vision began to tunnel. "Where is she?" the young man growled, his face inches from Leo's own. "Where is my sister?" Leo's hand reached out and found a heavy marble mortar on the counter. His fingers closed around it. He swung it with all the strength he had left, connecting with the young man's shoulder. The young man yelled, a sound of pure pain, and the tire iron fell to the floor with a clang. Leo shoved him back, both of them panting, both covered in sweat and blood. Leo's phone on the counter vibrated aggressively. The screen flashed, unknown. Leo and the young man both stared at it, their bodies tense, their breathing still ragged. The young man was holding his injured shoulder, leaning against the refrigerator. Leo picked up the phone and put it on speaker. A distorted, electronic voice came through the speaker. It was gravelly and artificial, clearly run through some kind of voice modulation software. "I have the girl, Leo, the one who was hiding in the hallway. If you want Maya back, bring the envelope to the old cannery on the waterfront. Tick-tock, 1 hour." Leo's face drained of color. "Who is this? What envelope?" But the line had already disconnected with a sharp beep. The young man lunged toward the phone. "Is she okay? Don't hurt her!" he screamed, his voice cracked with genuine terror and desperation. Leo turned to face him, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. "You're Julian." Julian turned to him, his face a mask of betrayal and confusion. "You left me. You left both of us." Leo ran toward his office, Julian trailing behind him. He burst through the door and went straight to the wall safe, spinning the dial with shaking fingers. The safe clicked open. The manila envelope was gone. In its place was a black business card with a white Vulture logo embossed on its center. Leo felt the world shift beneath his feet. "They were already inside," he said quietly. "They took the evidence, and they took Maya." He turned the card over. Vulture Security and Acquisitions was printed on the back in white lettering. They were being watched. They had been watched all along. Leo sat at his computer, typing rapidly. His fingers flew across the keyboard with desperate speed. Beside him, Julian stood with his injured shoulder held at an angle, watching the monitor. Leo searched for the Vulture logo. A website appeared, loading with a soft digital hum. Vulture Security and Acquisitions materialized on the screen, sleek and professional. A navigation bar listed services: asset recovery, information acquisition, security consulting. And then the CEO's face appeared. Leo gasped. His fingers froze on the keyboard, his chest constricted as if his heart had stopped beating. The CEO was Marcus Sterling. Marcus Sterling, his business partner, his best friend of 20 years. The man he'd trusted with his company's secrets, his personal plans, his vulnerabilities. The man who had stood beside him at every milestone and every failure. "Marcus," Leo whispered, his voice broken. "You bastard. You knew. You've known the whole time." Julian pointed to the sidebar on the website. "Client portfolio, Vance Electronics." Leo's fingers moved across the monitor, clicking through pages of financial documents. Spreadsheets materialized on the screen, dense with numbers and figures. Transactions, wire transfers, siphoning. Billions of dollars had been funneled from Vance Electronics into Vulture Security accounts over the years. Marcus had been bleeding his company dry. The affair with Elena wasn't the leverage. It was the bait. The entire situation had been manufactured, orchestrated, a long-game con that had taken 18 years to execute. Leo stood and moved to a drawer in his desk. He pulled it open and removed a heavy black Glock 17 handgun. He checked the magazine, full. The rounds sat in neat brass rows. He slid the magazine back into the gun with a metallic click. The slide chambered around with a soft sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet office. Julian picked up the tire iron again. He looked at Leo. Their eyes met. An understanding passed between them without words. The father and the son he'd never known. "Let's go get our girl," Julian said. They exited the office toward the garage. Leo's SUV pulled up to the old cannery at 11 o'clock. The structure was a rusting warehouse that had been abandoned for decades. Industrial equipment was visible through broken windows, silhouettes against the night sky. The rain had intensified, falling in heavy sheets that blurred the world beyond the windshield. Leo and Julian stepped out into the pouring rain. They were soaked within seconds. The door to the cannery was ajar, a single yellow light glowing from within like an infected eye. They moved toward the entrance. Inside, two men in tactical gear stepped out from behind large, rusted vats. One held a crowbar, the other a baton. They moved with trained precision, cutting off any path toward the back of the warehouse. Leo raised his gun, but henchman 1 was faster. He kicked it out of Leo's hand before he could aim. The Glock skittered across the concrete, sliding under a piece of machinery. Julian roared and swung the tire iron at henchman 2, connecting with the man's ribs with a sickening crunch. The henchman doubled over. Leo lunged for his gun, but henchman 1 grabbed him in a chokehold from behind, one massive forearm crushing Leo's windpipe. Leo's face turned purple as he clawed at the man's forearms, trying to break the grip. His vision began to tunnel. Black spots swam at the edges of his sight. Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver Zippo from the birthday scene. His fingers found the mechanism and flipped it open. The flame appeared, bright and fierce. He held the burning lighter to the henchman's arm. The man screamed. His skin seared and blistered. He released the chokehold immediately, falling back. Leo gasped for air, his throat burning, his lungs heaving. He elbowed the henchman in the gut, and the man doubled over. Leo recovered his gun. Both henchmen were down now, groaning and bleeding on the concrete floor. Julian had a cut on his brow, blood dripping down his face. They moved deeper into the cannery, toward a small office lit by fluorescent lights. The humming of the lights seemed impossibly loud in the cavernous space. Leo burst into the office. Marcus was sitting behind a metal desk, calmly filing his nails as if he were waiting in a spa. He looked up as Leo entered, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Maya was tied to a chair in the corner, a piece of duct tape over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. Leo raised his gun, pointing it directly at Marcus's chest. "Step away from her, now." Marcus didn't move. He simply smiled and held up a small glass vial filled with a clear liquid. The vial caught the fluorescent light and seemed to glow. "Careful, Leo," Marcus said, his voice conversational and deadly. "This isn't just about your secret son. This is about your daughter's life. She's already been injected. I have the antidote." Leo's gun trembled in his hands. "Sign the company over to Vulture," Marcus continued, setting down his nail file. "Sign right now, and she gets the shot. She lives. She goes to college, falls in love, has a beautiful life. Don't sign, and she stops breathing in 10 minutes. The poison will kill her from the inside out. Her organs will fail. She'll be conscious the entire time." Marcus gestured to the documents on the desk. A transfer of ownership form sat beside a black ink pen. Leo looked at the documents. His hand shook as he reached for the pen. Julian watched, helpless, his knuckles white on the tire iron. Leo's hand moved across the paper, his signature blooming in black ink on the final line. Each letter was agony. His whole sense of the world, his understanding of trust and friendship, was being inked away with each stroke. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. The best part? Elena didn't come to you today. I sent her. I've been paying her to keep that boy hidden for 18 years, just for this day. Just for this moment. Every tear she cried, every night she spent alone, I orchestrated it all. Leo looked up from the paper, understanding crashing down on him like a wave. Elena wasn't a victim of regret. She was Marcus's accomplice. His entire understanding of what had happened, the hidden wall that had separated him from his past, was a manufactured construction, a fiction designed by his oldest friend. Marcus took the signed paper and examined it, running his finger across Leo's signature. You're dismissed. He looked at the vial in his hand, then dropped it onto the concrete floor. The glass shattered. The liquid that spilled out was clear and thin, spreading in a puddle across the floor. The antidote pooled in the cracks of the concrete, all three of them. Together at last, were going to die in this abandoned warehouse. Leo's mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, calculations. There was no way out of the room. The back door was sealed. The windows were too high and reinforced. The bomb had been placed with professional precision. Then he saw it. A pressurized oxygen tank near the vats, a heavy wrench on a tool belt on the floor, a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the bay. Leo moved with sudden purpose. He gestured for Julian to help him. Together, they dragged the oxygen tank toward the window. 40 seconds. Leo grabbed the wrench and smashed the valve off the oxygen tank. The gas hissed out with immense pressure, the sound like 1,000 snakes. They used the tank as a battering ram against the reinforced glass. The first hit cracked it. The second hit spiderwebbed the damage. On the third hit, the glass shattered in a cascade of fragments. 30 seconds. Leo grabbed Maya and Julian by their jackets. He could see the dark water of the bay below, 40 feet down. The light from his gun illuminated a small area of the wharf. He hurled them out of the window. They fell into the darkness, their screams swallowed by the wind. 5 seconds. Leo leaped after them. Mid-air, he saw the warehouse explode. A wall of fire and debris chased him through the night air, reaching for him like burning hands. He felt the heat on his back, searing, terrible. He hit the cold, salty water and sank into the dark. The surface above was a boiling sheet of orange flame. The muffled thump of the explosion echoed through the water, vibrating through his bones. He swam, his lungs burning, toward where he'd seen Julian pull Maya to the surface. Marcus was at his silver Mercedes in the wharf parking lot, fumbling with his keys. He looked back at the burning cannery, watching it collapse inward on itself, a smile of satisfaction on his face. He had won. He opened the car door and got in, starting the engine. A soaking wet hand smashed through the driver's side window. Leo, face covered in soot and blood, drags Marcus out through the broken glass. Marcus screamed as his expensive suit was shredded on the sharp edges. Julian appeared, holding the wet manila envelope. He found it in Marcus's car, retrieved from the safe somehow in the chaos. He dropped it in front of Marcus's face in the mud. Leo pinned Marcus against the car tire, his forearm against Marcus's throat. The vial was fake, Leo said, his voice cold and deadly. I'm a chemist. I smelled the sugar water. I knew it was fake the second I opened it. Marcus's face contorted with rage and desperation. My security is coming, Leo said. He pulled out the black business card he'd found in the safe and jammed it into Marcus's mouth. But I called the police first. Police sirens wailed in the distance, their high-low wail growing closer by the second. Leo released Marcus and stepped back. Leo, Maya, and Julian sat on the front porch steps of Leo's house as the sun began to peek over the horizon. They were wrapped in gray hospital blankets, and the paramedics had moved on to tend to other survivors being pulled from the bay. The morning was clear and cold. Birds chirped after the storm, celebrating survival. Maya reached out and took Julian's hand. Then she took Leo's hand. For the first time, the wall in her eyes was gone. She looked at her father with a mix of pain and understanding that seemed impossible for her age. Leo pulled a small, charred object from his pocket. It was the 18 candle from the cake, slightly melted, its shape distorted by heat. He handed it to Maya. "We're going to start over," Leo said. His voice was hoarse from the salt water and the smoke. "All three of us." Maya leaned her head on Leo's shoulder. Julian leaned on Maya. Leo opened his wallet with his other hand. He pulled out a photograph of his own father. It was old, the edges worn soft from years of handling. He showed it to Julian and Maya. "This is my father," Leo said. "He died when I was 16, but he has another name in his story that I only just learned. He was Elena's father too, which means Elena is my sister, a sister I never knew I had." Julian studied the photograph, comparing it to some memory stored somewhere in his inherited genetics. "You don't say that word. Sister. Sister. Unless someone forces you to hold it, to speak it. And I've been forced now. You've been forced now. We've all been forced to hold something that should have been held gently a long time ago by different people in a different world." The three of them sat in silence as the sun continued to rise. The silence was no longer a wall, but a shared space. A place where they could simply exist together, without words, without explanations, without the burden of secrets. The sun hit the house fully now, illuminating the front porch, casting long shadows behind them. From a distance, they looked like three figures carved into the morning itself. Inseparable, battered, but present, alive.